Hey guys, Alan here, Solid Rock Bible Class. Hey, I am so glad you're with me today. Sorry about last week. Things kind of went awry electronically, and so we've got it for this week. We're going to be talking about a test. You know, life is a test. Every single day, life is a test. I think of that screen that used to pop up on the television with that terrible noise, and they still have that terrible noise to some degree. And it says, this is a test. This is only a test. This is a test of the American broadcast system, you know. But we're going to be a little bit all over the place. I'm going to start out in 1 Peter, though. In 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, picking up in verse 12, he says, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trials, which is to try you." First of all, I want to stop here just for a second. Notice he talks about fiery trials. We're talking about a test. Every day we're being tested. And notice it's not if they come, he says, will try you, which is to try you. As though some strange thing happened unto you. What he's saying here, he says, don't think it's strange when this stuff happens. I think sometimes we take things like this just a little bit too personal. Just prior to this, going back over to 1 Peter, the 1st chapter, verse 7, he says that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perisheth. He said, our faith, it's more important than gold. And then he goes on, though it be tried with fire, might be found to the praise and the honor and the glory of the appearing of Jesus Christ. See, we are going to go through some constant tests within our life. I don't know about you, I hate tests. But a test is here, it's here to help us. It's not here to hurt us. It really is there. God has them in place for us to help us every single day. So, I remember back in school, as I said, I absolutely hate tests. And boy, I really hated pop quizzes. Boy, you'd be sitting in class, in the middle of class, teacher'd say, close your books, pull out a piece of paper. This is a test. And here we had this pop quiz. But this is what life is absolutely full of. Tests every single day within our life, every single day of our faith. And again, let's remember, a test is there to help us. It's not to hurt us. It's to teach us. It's to prepare us. In James, the 1st chapter, he says, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Now, I've always been told, don't ever take and pray for patience, because you're going to have problems when you pray for patience. But realize these tests that we have, these problems we have, it says the trying of your faith. He said, it worketh patience. It has an end result within our life. God knows what he's doing. God has a plan. I think a little bit of back in the book of Daniel, and I wanted to jump through some of the things here in Daniel for a few verses here. I think most of us know most of what's going on in the book of Daniel. But Daniel, he's been taken to Babylon as a slave. And one of the very first tests that we see Daniel has here is the fact that King Nebuchadnezzar, he took and he pulled the very core best people he could find from Israel. And he wanted to use them, use their minds, use their abilities. And so he took and he put Daniel in a position to take and be part of his royalty there, as far as his advisors and kind of his think tank, I guess you could call it. In doing that, he intended to take and make sure they had the very best of foods, the same foods the king would have. In Daniel, the 1st chapter, verse 8, but it says, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat. Hey, the problem here was the diet that Nebuchadnezzar was trying to put him on and the others on, it was against his biblical principles that he had in the Old Testament. And then we see that Daniel said, I'm not going to do this. Give me basically vegetables. And it's an eye-opener for King Nebuchadnezzar here. We look in verse 19. It says, and the king commanded with them, and among them, and the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel. Okay, we see that in his compadres that he was working with. None of them was as good as what Daniel and his crew was, even though they was eating this poultice or these vegetables. We kick over into Daniel, the 2nd chapter. Notice that this is a test for Daniel. This is also a test for King Nebuchadnezzar, wasn't it? We see here in Daniel, the 2nd chapter, Daniel's promoted. And Daniel takes and he interprets a dream here for Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel, the 2nd chapter. In verse 46, verse 47 here, he says, then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer obligations of sweet odors unto him. And the king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords and kings, and the revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal the secret. Notice, again, it looks like Nebuchadnezzar, it looks like maybe he's got a hold of this, but he doesn't. But notice, this is a test. It's only a test, right? But Nebuchadnezzar's failing the test. Daniel's passing the test here. Nebuchadnezzar's failing the test. It's another test for Daniel. It's another test for Nebuchadnezzar. Then we see Daniel, the 3rd chapter. This shows us that, guess what? Nebuchadnezzar failed. Because in Daniel, the 3rd chapter, we see the fiery furnace, don't we? The 3 Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. In Daniel 3:29 it says, therefore, I will make a decree that every person, every nation, every language shall speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What happened just prior to this? He took and he made this image, and he made everybody take and bow down to it when the music played. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego wouldn't do it. He threw them in the fiery furnace. They lived through it. Now he says this again. But again, we see Nebuchadnezzar, he failed. He failed in his test. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they passed the test. It was a test. It was a test for Nebuchadnezzar's. Then Nebuchadnezzar has another dream. In Daniel, the 4th chapter, Daniel interprets that dream. But realize here, Nebuchadnezzar never did. Even though verbally he had some good things to say, he never took and followed through with his faith in God. But we kick into Daniel, the 5th chapter here. We see another test. We have a different king now, King Belshazzar. And we see that he throws a big party. And this big party had to do with, he pulled a bunch of the vessels out of the temple and was disgracing them. He was drinking liquor out of them and doing other things of that nature and having a big party. And all of a sudden we see the handwriting on the wall. Notice that Daniel, even though he's in the upper echelon of people, he's not at this party. They call for Daniel. He interprets that handwriting on the wall. we kick down into Daniel, the 5th chapter. So we see that Belshazzar, he failed. We look at Daniel, the 5th chapter. Another king. Daniel's in the lion's den with Darius. Daniel, the 6th chapter. We see Darius here. And guess what? Pride takes over here. In Daniel, the 6th chapter, verse 20, we see that Daniel's been thrown in the lion's den. He survived. We see that King Darius comes down to where they threw him in. And it says, and when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said, Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lion's den. Then Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. See, life is a test. Daniel was tested over and over. Even though he was a champion, he was tested. And we're going to be tested until the day we go home. So the question is, are we passing the test? Are we passing the daily test that God gives us? Do you know people like this, where that God keeps helping them and blessing them and delivering them, yet they never take and follow through with a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ? What about you? How many times has God helped and shown you things? How many times does God have to rescue us before we realize the fact He's there for us? How many miracles does He have to perform in our life? What does He have to do to prove it to us that life is a test and we need to pass that test every day? So as kind of the thought to generally take away is, life is a test. It's a daily test. We must pass the test. Hey guys, I'll catch up with you just a little bit later.